From Covert Control to Conscious Collaboration by Sam Bell. The covert use of neuromarketing and neuroscience in behavior modification. A civilian perspective on ethics, evidence, and empowerment. In recent decades, the landscape of marketing, education, and public policy has been quietly transformed by a growing field called neuromarketing, a hybrid of neuroscience, psychology, and behavioral economics. While overt applications of neuroscience in medicine, such as epilepsy and depression, are widely celebrated, covert uses for social influence and behavior modification, especially those unauthorized by informed consent, have largely escaped public scrutiny. Now is the in context time to examine these developments using the structured lens of do no harm ethics, the analytical rigor of philosophical inquiry, and a spiritually grounded framework rooted in civilian service and interdimensional cooperation, emphasizing the ethical implications of these practices and the need for public awareness and disclosure. Time has come to awaken and inform public at the intersection of neuroethics and civic responsibility. Each human, a luminous spark of the divine, possesses the right and responsibility to steward their own cognitive liberty. The Civilian Corps, an independent, peace-oriented organization allied with loving extraterrestrial beings, affirms the sacred value of every consciousness. Together, we aim to explore how the hidden tools of neuromarketing and brain mapping might be redirected from coercive manipulation tools to compassionate instruments of healing, compassionate instruments of growth and elevation of collective awareness. This transformation is not just a theoretical concept, but an urgent call to action that requires the active participation and empowerment of every community member in the face of escalating covert use of neuroscience. 1. The foundations. What is neuromarketing? In a skilled rehabilitation setting, when assessing a patient's cognitive baseline, a practitioner may observe changes in attention, memory, mood, and executive function. These neurological features also form the basis of consumer decisions. Neuromarketing, therefore, is the scientific study of how stimuli, visual, auditory, and emotional, trigger predictable patterns in brain activity that lead to behavioral outcomes, such as purchasing a product or adopting a belief. Using EEGs and fMRIs and even eye tracking, corporations and political entities have quietly tapped into the neural substrates, the specific parts of the brain responsible for desire, fear, trust, and loyalty. These modalities allow marketers to bypass conscious deliberation and directly appeal to the subconscious reward systems. When improperly employed, such techniques are tantamount to subtle psychological coercion, a violation of the Florence Nightingale pledge to, quote, devote oneself to the welfare of those committed to our care, unquote. So, what began as a tool for consumer insight has increasingly become a behavioral conditioning in the areas ranging from political messaging to digital addiction, even to education policy. The implication is clear. When left unchecked, neuroscience can be weaponized, commodifying the brain itself. 2. Brain mapping and behavioral modification, the scientific mechanism. To understand the ethical stakes, specifically in neuroplasticity and behavioral programming, one must first grasp the human's brain's basic anatomical and functional mapping. The prefrontal cortex. This is the seat of decision-making, impulse control, and long-term planning. Neuromarketing strategies often suppress this region by overstimulating the amygdala, which governs emotional reactivity, especially fear and reward anticipation. The limbic system, home to the hippocampus and amygdala, processes emotions and memory. Repeated emotional triggers, particularly those reinforced by high definition imagery and emotionally charged language, can rewire emotional responses, a process known as affective conditioning. The default mode network, DMN, recent studies suggest that this network, active during rest and introspection, plays a role in identity formation. Covert neuroscience interventions can nudge a people's self, a sense of self, subtly but meaningfully, especially when combined with social media algorithms. Clinical professionals recognize how trauma can rewire these regions, just as healing practices restore them. So too must we realize that neuroplasticity, the brain's inherent ability to rewire, is a double-edged sword. Used with love and consent, it can elevate. Used without ethics, it can enslave. Here are some age-specific examples of behavioral manipulation. Children 5 to 12 years old. The case: targeted mobile games reward users with dopamine-triggered stimuli after each short interaction. Advertisements embedded gameplay influence children before they develop critical reasoning. The neural target, ventral striatum and amygdala. The effect, early dependence on instant gratification, decreased attention span, and altered development of executive function. How about adolescents and young adults, 13 to 25? Case would be social media platforms employ real-time feedback loops, likes, shares, and algorithmic reinforcement to induce behavioral dependency and shape political or consumer choices. Neural target, the prefrontal cortex is under development, and the mesolimbic reward pathway is under development. The effect, heightened emotional volatility, polarization of beliefs, erosion of self-regulation, and dopamine-driven dependency on external validation. Okay, the elders, holders, 50 and up. The case, television and social media advertisements use nostalgia and fear messaging to direct political or economic behaviors, particularly in times of social stress, pandemics, or elections. The neural target, hippocampus, memory, and the anterior cingulate cortex for conflict resolution. The effect, manipulated decision-making through emotional salience, affecting votes, affecting donations, affecting health choices without informed evaluation. These examples reflect patterns observed in public health and psychological research, but more crucially, they highlight how neuroscience, if covertly used, undermines autonomy and informed choice, principles sacred to medicine and philosophy. So, we need some modern day solutions. How about this? Open source neurological literacy. We must empower communities through neuroscience education at the grassroots level. Just as basic hygiene became a public health revolution, understanding one's brain must become a new civic literacy. This could include community-led workshops, online modules, youth programs, and demystifying brain autonomy, neuroplasticity, and media literacy. Healthcare professionals can play a role here as educators, promoting cognitive hygiene, just as they promote physical health. Philosophy instructors might assist by engaging students in critical media analysis, questioning what they think and how they came to think about it. Ethical standards for neural technologies like the Hippocratic Oath in medicine, a global ethical charter must regulate the use of neural technologies and behavioral interventions. This would include transparency requirements, opt-in systems, and strict bans on unauthorized data mining of neurological patterns. Civilian oversight committees could assist and consist of spiritual leaders, scientists, and educators. Importantly, As the civilian corps recognizes, this initiative must be independent of state and corporate interests, perhaps guided by indigenous wisdom traditions and benevolent extraterrestrial allies. Service based civic neuroscience. Instead of marketing driven behavioral engineering, imagine a network of volunteers, the Civilian Corps civic neuroscience volunteers, trained to use brain-based techniques to foster compassion, brain-based techniques to foster resilience and cooperation in their communities. Example, mindfulness based on neuroeducation for youth. Music and rhythm therapy for elders. Trauma-informed community dialogue circles for healing and peacemaking. These volunteers acting in service to others become neural guardians, protectors of their fellow humans' cognitive sovereignty. Civilian Corps and the spiritual ethos of cognitive liberation. Civilian Corps in partnership with benevolent, extraterrestrial allies and loving beings from higher dimensions stands in firm opposition to the weaponization of consciousness. We affirm that every being is sacred, born with the right to elevate their awareness through love, discernment, and service. In this framework, brain mapping becomes not a means of control, but a tool for personalized healing. Behavior modification is not imposed, but co-created through consent, guidance, and sacred intention. Neuroscience is not the handmaiden of commerce, but a spiritual instrument that aligns mind and soul in harmonious frequency. By integrating science and spirituality, we reclaim our future from manipulation and return it to conscious, heart-centered evolution. The covert use of neuroscience and neuromarketing raises urgent ethical questions and practical concerns, but also offers a profound opportunity. Like fire, these tools can warm the hearth, or scorch the earth. The choice lies not in the tools, but in the user's intention. To that end, let us advocate for an awakening, not only of minds, but of hearts. That doctors and nurses and therapists, philosophers, scientists, mothers and fathers, citizens become guardians of neural integrity, champions of free thought, and builders of a world where the brain serves the soul, not the market. In doing so, we remember we are not commodities to be harvested, but co-creators in the cosmic unfolding of love, light, and liberation. Evolution of consciousness is Civilian Corps being the living testimony that another way is possible and already beginning. Samuel Joseph Bell, founder, Civilian Corps, civilian journalist, spiritualmag.org. You and all your loved ones are always in my prayers.